Right, there it is. Well, welcome everyone to Pathways to Success. This is a career panel on ecological professions. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Sandra Del Rio. I'm the Professional Programs Coordinator at the Ecological Society of America. And I'm excited to be moderating this event, and I want to thank our panelists for joining us here today. All of our panelists are part of the Ecological Society of America in one way or the other. We have some that are SEEDS alumni, and we have those that are part of the Board of Professional Certification. So many thanks. And I just wanted to share a very brief just overview of today's event. Again, this is a panel discussion to share thoughts on being a professional ecologist, but also how can professional societies like ESA and programs like SEEDS can better serve those that are underrepresented in science specifically. If you have questions, you can click on the reactions and use the raise your hand feature. We do ask you to please keep your microphone muted until we call upon you. I'll be checking those who raise their hand and or make any questions in the chat box. You're more than welcome to do that. And also share resources, share your emails if you'd like at any time. And again, as usual, these calls are recorded and this event will be recorded is being recorded as well. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's panel. We have Miroslava Munguia. Miroslava is a park guide at the Santa Monica Mountains, and that's part of the National Park Service. Miroslava's academic background is in environmental science and management, as well as wildlife, fish, and conservation biology. We're also joined by Kat Superfisky. Kat is the Urban Ecologist at the City of Los Angeles. Kat's academic background is in conservation, ecology, and landscape architecture. And Valeria Paz. Valeria is an ecological risk assessor at the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And Valeria's academic background is in biology and marine biology. And now I will actually hand it over to our panelists to share a little bit more about themselves. And actually, I'm gonna go with, in this order from left to right again, with Miroslava.
Awesome, thank you. So it's 2 o'clock here in the West Coast, so happy afternoon, everyone. My name is Miroslava Munguia. Like Sandra mentioned, I am currently a park guide with the National Park Service in the Santa Monica Mountains. I graduated from UC Davis, go Ags. It's environmental science and a minor in wildlife, fish, and conservation bio. And when I got into college, I knew I wanted to work towards conservation in some way, shape, or form, just because climate change sounds very scary and it's still very not the happiest thing to think about, but it's comforting seeing how much is going on towards fighting efforts and helping get more folks involved. And I really didn't know what to do aside from, wanting to be in the sciences. So when I got to college, it was very intimidating being a first-gen student. It's a terrifying field altogether. And I was in a running team at the time. I had some folks mention the SEEDS Club program. I thought that sounds neat. I'll check it out. So I got involved near the end of my sophomore year, and my junior and senior year, I was one of the co-presidents for the chapter. I attended the ESA meeting the summer after my senior year, stayed in touch with a lot of my mentors, and through a lot of bouncing around, figuring out, what the next step is. A lot of it's comforting, terrifying, exciting, but I think thanks to, SEEDS and the ESA, I was able to really put my best foot forward and confidently say, where I need help to kind of be guided in the right directions. And, always excited to help out other folks either in the SEEDS program or those getting interested in the environmental field.
Awesome, thank you. Kat.
Yeah, I'll chime in next and say good afternoon, everybody, too. I'm also on West Coast time, so tuning in from Los Angeles, from the city of LA. And yeah, Sandra did a great job of giving you an overview of my background. I will just say that I'm not originally from Los Angeles. I'm actually from the Midwest. I am from Michigan, and I collected my degrees from the University of Michigan. And I had actually started on a very traditional ecological kind of a route where I got an undergraduate degree in environmental sciences. I focused on land use management. And then I went out and I worked for 2 years, helping to manage 24,000 acres of parkland surrounding the context of Detroit. So in kind of a suburban context. And it was really through that experience that I realized the importance of people in the conservation work that I was trying to do. I needed to get people off the bike paths. I needed to get people out of the beaches. I needed to get people into the wet mesic prairies that I was trying to restore, right? And so I decided to go back to school and get a second degree in ecology. So I got a Master of Science in Conservation Ecology to further my understanding of ecosystems. But then I decided to couple that with a landscape architecture degree so I could understand how to more mindfully connect people to the work that I was trying to do, so that we make those kind of connections, we gain that appreciation, and then hopefully we have more stewards and people who are wanting to do this kind of conservation work. The reason that I'm now in Los Angeles is because the other thing that I realized then when I was back in grad school, that was about the time that we tipped as a human species and a population to be living more in cities than any other type of ecosystem across the world. And that was very illuminating to me, because at that same time, when I was in my conservation ecology classes, I was learning that cities were some of the places that were causing the largest environmental challenges, the habitat fragmentation, the degradation, species extinction, so on and so forth. So I decided that upon my graduating with both of those degrees, where I really needed to go was into urban ecosystems and be able to help enlist the help and support of residents who are living here, the people part of things. And again, connecting them to the nature that already exists within places like Los Angeles or these other cities, and then work with them to then enhance the nature that we have here, and the kind of symbiotic cities that we can then create, where we're coexisting with plants and animals. So that's why I ended up in Los Angeles. I've been here for about 10 years now, and I'm happy to be serving as the city's urban ecologist.
Right, thank you so much, Kat. And Valeria, share a little bit about
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm here in the East Coast from Boston. And well, my background is a little bit different. So I started out undergrad wanting to go into science, but more biomedical. And ecology wasn't really something that I really thought of as a career. I grew up in Peru, but for most of my high school and grad school, I was in Florida. And for the first 2 years of undergrad, I was pretty much set on being a doctor until I actually did and try out, like, I volunteered at different hospitals, from veterinaries to actual hospitals. And I found myself very unhappy being enclosed indoors. And it wasn't until I took the ecology class in undergrad that I discovered, hey, this is actually like something that sounds really interesting. And I joined SEATS actually at the end of my junior year. And it was a brand new club. We did not have a SEATS chapter. I was part of the first SEATS chapter in my university. And that gave me also a really big support system from other Hispanic, underrepresented groups of students that were also into ecology. I received my undergrad from FIU. I did marine biology. And the great thing about science and actually undergrad is the ability to be able to try out everything that you're interested in. So I went from studying genetics to coral reefs, to sharks, turtles, to what ended up being my graduate dissertation, which was studying the ecotoxicology in dolphins. So I received my PhD, and then I went on to being very interested in understanding how pollution enters the ecosystems, but also what we do as from the state level to federal level to mitigate that. And I became an ecological risk assessor in the US EPA. And I am under the wing that it's called Superfunds and Emergency Management Division. So I work in areas that are Superfund sites, which are areas that have been previously polluted and are in a national priorities list at the federal level to be cleaned up. And my job is to assess how that pollution is impacting different ecosystems, as well as if they did a cleanup, if that cleanup was good enough. So I'm part of a really good team. We have a team of hydrologists, geologists, ecologists, ecotoxicology. It's a very interdisciplinary group, and I'm really happy in this position at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to stop sharing now. And I did come prepared, but I want to again encourage you all to, you can make questions at any point. So now thinking about, again, going back to the background and how that leads you to where you're now, I think it's just great, you know, context. So now that you've talked about that academic, I guess, journey, how did you end up in the current line of work that you're in right now? Did you imagine that, like, that this is what you were going to end up doing, or like, how did that work?
I can start. So most of my work was marine mammal ecology. So I did not really see myself in this position when I started graduate school. It's definitely something that sparked my interest as I did my work and got more into it. So a lot of the work that I was doing before was habitat use, looking at where dolphins were using this estuary in the Florida Everglades. And with that just curiosity, I started to build on my project and decided, I was studying what dolphins were eating, and that led me to dig more into how food, so I studied isotopes, so tracking different carbon sources using carbon and nitrogen, and understanding if dolphins were using marine systems or more freshwater, because that was really big in the area that I was working in. And tracking food led me to also be curious about mercury. So mercury is really big in the Everglades, and the dolphins that I was studying had the highest mercury ever recorded. But after understanding that, I felt pretty, I would say, like, I did not have the capabilities to do more other than say, hey, they have the highest mercury ever recorded. And that kind of sparked an interest on digging more into ecotoxicology, and led me to write another grant to investigate how much mercury were in fish, and also selenium. So selenium is an antagonist to mercury, and it seemed like dolphins also have very high numbers. So it means like dolphins may not be doing as bad as they were. And that experience actually was in the last 2 years of my dissertation. So it was something that wasn't even planned. And that ecotoxicology aspect was something that was relatively new to me. And after I graduated, I thought about doing a path of doing a postdoc and continue to explore that. And I hadn't really considered the federal government as one of my options, really, until just doing job search in USA Jobs, which is a little bit tricky to deal with at first. I saw the description of this ecological risk assessor, and a very vague description of what the job actually was. And it wasn't until I did the interview and and talk to the agency that I discovered it was something that I would really want to do. So at first, I thought I was going to do the postdoc route, academics, and then just by doing job searches, I fell into this position. But now that I know, I would wish that I would tell everybody to be prepared, that if maybe the federal government is something you're interested in, there are ways to contact people ahead of time to get more of an insight. They have internships. And those opportunities, it wasn't something I knew about until after I joined, but I know a lot of the federal government employees now are hired through those internships.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if somebody would have looked in a crystal ball and told me that I'd be living in Los Angeles right now in 2023, I would have laughed and been like, you're absolutely nuts. I definitely did not see myself coming down this path at all. And the way that I got here was not just one straight predetermined path, which has been the very fun part. And that's always what I love trying to help others know, is that what I have found, at least in my career thus far, has been a lot of uncertainty of where it's not necessarily that, oh, I'm signing up to be an accountant and here's the one trajectory of how to become that. And then I become an accountant and I just stay as such for the remainder of my career. I think I was a little bit overwhelmed at first by that, by the big, vast expanse of possibilities. Now I really take it as inspiration. And so I like to, again, try to mirror that back to other folks. But yeah, I mean, I really saw as I mentioned, when I was back in school and really recognizing the importance of cities in saving the planet, because that, again, was the big purpose and mission that I felt like I was born with. I wanted to help save the planet. And I needed to figure out how to do that. And really in the courses that I was taking, the only kind of stuff that was being talked about in urban systems was urban agriculture. And so at that time I was like, oh, okay, well, if I want to go in and I want to integrate this concept of nature in with cities, then I have to be into the, decentralizing the urban or the industrial food system, and then being able to figure out how to do more of these kind of community-based, farms in urban spaces. And I felt really limited by that too. And it was like, really, is this all that we've got? But again, that was all that was really being talked about or reported on in my classes. And so it wasn't then until I met the Los Angeles River that it totally blew my mind and was the reason that my heart just pumped out of my chest. And I decided to move, over 2,000 miles across the country to a place like LA, because I started to recognize that in cities, we have these natural ecosystems still. We have done a great job as humans converting them into infrastructural systems that now the Los Angeles River might look a little bit more like a freeway than a waterway to an average person. But when you really peel back that concrete, steel, and infrastructure, you can see that the systems that I was learning about in school, the landform, the soils, the hydrologic systems, the plants, the animals, they were all still there. They're all still here. They're just maybe covered up in ways, they're degraded in ways, they're marginalized and being displaced in ways. So really, I saw that I kind of had this unique ability to see both the built and the natural at the same time. And I wanted to come to a space like Los Angeles and help others to be able to see that, to see the nature that we have here, the ecology that we have here. And again, to excite people to be a part of allowing that aspect of our city to sing a little bit more. And so it's been, again, like a very long journey and an interesting 10 years where when I first showed up, I actually started in the private sector, which I'll mention in case any folks are interested in going that route and have specific questions related to that. But I did posit myself in a landscape architecture and urban design firm so that I could help to take on a lot of the big plans and projects that were helping to create parks or trails and so on and so forth within the area. So I really got to get a sense of how they fit into, how an ecologist like me can fit into a sector like that and into a, a design type of a firm, and what their role is in managing urban ecosystems. I have since started a nonprofit, so I've gotten a window into that world as well, of how to leverage non-governmental organizations, to do a lot of the boots on the ground work, which is so important. I've continued to teach in academia, which has also allowed me to help almost fix the issue that I had in school where I wasn't necessarily already being trained about urban ecology. I didn't take a formal class about it. I didn't even crack a book on urban ecology until, a couple years ago. And so I love being able to go into the classroom now and help folks to understand how to make those linkages between science and these other key disciplines that we need to be connecting with to get the work done that we need to all be getting done. And then now I've shifted into the government. And so it's been fascinating to now see how policies and plans at this kind of level really make a difference in terms of the top-down approach to managing urban ecosystems. So again, I will say I was pretty strategic about making sure to put myself in these different contexts because I knew my overall goal of wanting to save the planet, of then wanting to figure out how to do so in cities. But then I knew that there was so many different players in that. And so I wanted to, again, try out the private sector, try out the nonprofit, try out the academic, try out the government to see what makes sense for someone like me with my perspective, my understanding, my expertise. How is it that I can best fit into each one of these? And how can we as ecologists really then start linking arms and initiatives together across those sectors and disciplines to really get the work done that we need to be doing? So it has been, again, a little bit of a path of doing a lot of different stuff that I would have never expected. So just be open to whatever kind of doors do end up opening. And, I'm always the person who loves to kind of blaze those new paths. And I love inspiring other people to do that same thing too.
Thank you, Kat. And Miroslava, did you know you were going to be a park ranger?
No, I think with a lot of, looking back on what I've been up to, even during college, I don't believe it because there will be some days where I'll be just casually hiking across the mountains. I'm thinking, wow, I'm being paid to do this, right? And in college, I feel like Valeria described it really nicely. You kind of go into classes and you're like, okay, like I can see where it goes forward. I know why general chemistry is important to know, but I don't see myself, actively balancing chemical reactions or things like that. And I remember going to office hours of a lot of my professors saying, okay, what's the next step? Like, how do you mix A and B to get an exciting job opportunity here? And a lot of them just said like, oh yeah, you want to work with conservation biology? You need to know chemistry, you need to know biology. You have to get the base, like the bricks to set up that foundation. And for me, with environmental science, it's such an interdisciplinary field. And with a lot of my classes, they did a great job putting the bricks together, but there wasn't really a nice mix between the two. So I could see why chemistry is important, but it didn't directly tie in with bird conservation, except for like a side story here or there. So when I was volunteering and taking all these internships in college, the entire time I was like, okay, I see the value of it now, but I was really struggling to see bigger picture. And it wasn't until my my sophomore year is one of the first these events I attended. We had some researchers from UCLA who introduced this concept of citizen or community science to me, where it's about getting folks who don't necessarily have that scientific expertise to come out and help with research. And I got really involved with this group to the point where I would come back for summers because I'm from the San Fernando Valley, so not too far from LA. So during summers, I would come back and do research, work in the lab with them. After graduation, they offered me a position. So I was working with environmental DNA, or eDNA for short. So I was thrilled because I would just be able to hang out with community members and say, okay, we're going to be collecting soil, sediment, water samples here. I'll take them to the lab, bounce it over to the other researchers, and we figure out what exactly is moving, breathing, living, passing by in these very urban environments. And Kat, as soon as you mentioned the LA River, I was like, oh my God, yes, because right before my position wrapped up, I was leading a project specifically studying the Los Angeles River using environmental DNA. And it's one of those things where I thought it was pretty gross. I lived by the river my whole life and you don't think much of it. And it isn't until you ask community members, you know, the cultural, the historic significance behind it. And throughout undergrad, I remember looking at all these job positions and I thought that sounds great, but something's missing. And it wasn't until I was, you know, working with our community scientists, reaching out to local organizations, and I realized it's that people component that I was really missing out on, because research is great. And in a lot of the labs I was in, they did a tremendous job, you know, finding these great discoveries or getting that one step closer to finding that missing puzzle piece. But for me, it was very enclosed, where if you're in that academic field, that's awesome. If you don't have that academic background, you don't think twice about the concept going on. So when I was still working with along the Los Angeles River and, you know, working with more organizations, I still wanted to get more of that people component, not necessarily with just community-based events, but ongoing work. And that's when I got involved with one of my local state parks, Malibu Creek State Park. They have this incredible docent program. So it's all about just kind of leading tours, learning about the natural history, learning about the indigenous history to portray back to the people. And there was a very kind ranger with the National Park Service who I stayed in touch with briefly. And at the time, I was still volunteering with the Santa Monica Mountains with a different wildlife aspect, just because I still wanted that outside frolicking time while still, you know, expanding on my skill set. And when I got in touch with this ranger, she let me know, hey, there's this new hiring authority coming out due to the pandemic where parks are really looking to hire folks short term really quick. So she was able to send the application over to me. I sent it back. I got brought in with the park, and I think, you know, I still don't believe how things kind of just line up really nicely without really planning it all that much in advance. So I work under the Division of Interpretation, Education, and Volunteers in the park. So that means I lead the guided hikes, I help out with festivals, I help with virtual and in-person field trips. I also work with the volunteers, meaning I do the super fun, awesome paperwork and I collect timesheets, but I also get to train folks and really, instead of telling folks, this is a park, enjoy, I can tell them, this is a great park, enjoy it, but look at other ways you can give back to your park, and learning those skill sets, apply it back to your local neighborhoods or wherever you're coming in from. That way it's this kind of positive feedback loop where you're constantly giving back regardless of where you're coming in from. And I did not in any way, shape, or form during college think, you know, federal government's the way I want to go, but this position has opened my eyes to a lot of different aspects. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, that one, you know, working as an undergrad tour guide, I'm comfortable talking with people and frolicking in dirty water. I'm okay playing with ticks. So kind of just little skills as you pick up and kind of go on your way makes it really exciting. And for me, I always tell folks, don't sell yourself short. Let's say you just I had an intern who said, I only worked at Big Lots my whole life. And I said, that's great. That means you have customer service skills. You know how to keep your cool when someone's yelling at you. Really important skill. Doesn't mean you don't have as much experience as someone who knows how to pipette things in a lab for hours on end. So I think everyone should give themselves more credit I think folks don't give themselves nearly enough credit as they do, regardless of where their position is, their academic background, or how sciencey of positions they've had in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, and just trying to, I know you've all mentioned things yes, that life is not a straight line. There's not a set of steps already there that are gonna guarantee anything. So there's also, you mentioned networking, the importance of networking and transferable skills, but now thinking of maybe not the success and the beauty, but let's talk about what were those challenges you faced and you had to overcome to get to where you are now. Could you share more? Would anybody want to share about some of those challenges maybe other advice you would give to those that are perhaps exploring different career options. Maybe that person that is working at Big Lots and they're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life, even though I'm maybe going to school or not. Like what advice would you share based on your own challenges and experience to those that are just like starting to put themselves out there in the work landscape?
I will say for me, the big thing is always try to put things into perspective. Because I remember my junior, one of my quarters, during my last 2 years, I was in academic probation and I thought my life was over because I was at the risk of losing scholarships and all of this. And I had a very kind graduate student pull me to the side and she's like, okay, just 10 weeks of your life, that's gonna be a lot more than 10 weeks. You got this. You know, it's just trying to have that reliable support system that will keep you on track and just kind of help balance you out when you're, you know, too far in any direction. I think it also helps making sure you take the time to take a break on things. It's very, very, very easy to get burnt out in a field where there's 1.5 million opportunities in every other turn. So making sure if you're at that point where you get another email, you'll have to stare at a wall for another 2 weeks. Or for me, I know there've been times where if I have to have like talk about parks for 3 more hours, it feels like I'm going to burst into flame. So just being able to kind of sit or watch TV or just taking time out, making sure I give myself that perspective and taking a break, I think is really important. And I think especially in academia, it's always like you got to go, you're in a rush, there's a grant deadline, there's a class you got to take, there's a club activity going on. It's great to sign up for it, but it's important to make sure that you check in with yourself first before you add something else on your plate. That way, whatever you do go forward with, you give it your 100% and you're confident in that you're doing the right thing and you're not just rushing to get as many things done as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Like that, a quote that I learned about, maybe I would have liked to learn more, would have liked to know it existed earlier, but you can't pour out of an empty cup. So yes. Anybody else? Oh, Valeria, you're muted. There you go.
I definitely agree with taking time for yourself. As an undergrad, I worked 2 jobs and tried to have time to volunteer, and a lot of the volunteer opportunities seem to be non-paid volunteer opportunities. But I like to think that in the last like 5 years, 3 years, there's more opportunities for paid opportunities. So it wasn't, I think my first few years, I really sacrificed a lot of my free time just to get that experience. But later on, I learned that if it's a paid internship or something that is going to give something back to me, it was worth doing. And those unpaid internships, I no longer did. It also depends on the opportunity and how closely it aligns with what you are interested in. I would say that it is really important to always check back in yourself, because what you like now may not be the same thing that you like later. And it's okay to change and change back and have various interests. I think it's very common for ecologists to have various interests. We like to see the big picture, see how everything works together. We are very passionate about what we do, and that's a really good attribute, but also it could get very overwhelming. But it is okay to change. It's okay to try different things. And I think a lot of my experiences outside of what was from my like academics, a lot of those experiences were really good in just giving me experience to add to my resume. So it was those outside of academic like internships or programs, the 1 week programs, 2 week programs. I did one on like, it was creating an environmental report card with working, and it was different opportunities that if I didn't know where to look, I wouldn't have found them. So it's talking to those mentors that let you know, hey, like there's this listserv that has a lot of opportunities. If you check, like, periodically, you may find something that aligns with you. And a lot of those opportunities were what set me apart and really gave me more skills to be more, I guess, like competitive when I graduated. But talking to mentors is really important. And it may be really intimidating at first because obviously a lot of professors are very, very busy. But they do appreciate if you come to office hours and talk to them, especially if you're interested in the work that they do. And TAs are really good resources as well. Or even after you, like if you attend a panel, a lot of the panelists are open to talking to you and if they're available as a resource. So that's what was great. I've had really great mentors that each have given me pieces of advice that have been really good throughout, and taking the time to get to know people really helps to learn from their experience and see how it can help you make the decision of where to go.
Yeah, and I think if I had to reflect on probably the thing that I've struggled with or been challenged with the most up to now, I think it really has been feeling like I don't fit into any certain box. And unfortunately, like struggling with that for a while instead of now more just like embracing it. But it was, again, very scary to be like, okay, well, I'm an ecologist, but now I'm moving into a city and I feel like this is weird. And how do I find myself as an ecologist in a city? Well, and now I'm going into a landscape architecture and urban design firm and field, but as an ecologist, and how, and it wasn't necessarily that they had we're posting an opening for an urban ecologist. We know who you are and we want you. It's been a lot of me having to help explain to various other people the importance of the skills and the expertise that I hold and I bring and that our discipline brings. And that for a lot has been it's been exhausting and also a little bit, you feel alone at times. And right now I'm one ecologist in a 500+ person planning department. It's the largest planning department in the country. And so I have kind of, again, operated, I guess, my entire life as being not great at fitting into any one box. And I think that again, was a little bit frightening to me at first, especially in the younger versions of myself, where I saw a lot of other people graduating. I saw them finding their way maybe more easily down certain paths, and they didn't have to explain who they were, what they could bring, and what they were doing in these certain contexts. Whereas I felt like I have had to do that in each one of my jobs thus far, is that I come in and I help to broaden people's perspective and teach them about, our skills and our expertise and what it is that they can benefit from, being in relation with us. So I definitely did, I think, feel very challenged for a while at the fact that I felt like I never just had that, oh, well, here's the job posting that's just perfect for me and it's asking for me and I'm just going to click and say yes, like that's validation. Great. It's been a little bit more of the flip side of things, of helping people craft job positions for me when they know that, again, they want to work with me, and helping them along to understand, what an urban ecologist is, so on and so forth. So I think that, yeah, that's been kind of my biggest challenge of just being that kind of trailblazer in certain ways. And, what was said earlier about reaching out to other people, like 100%, that's the only way that I've gotten to where I'm at. And it's not just by looking at, professors or instructors or subject matter experts that you might think might be a great resource. It's like, I've talked to artists, I've talked to poets, I've talked to people on the street, I've talked to like the amount of conversations that I've had with just tons of people have really informed what it is that I'm doing and how it is that I'm going down this kind of a path. And so I really do think that the less you can think of networking as like a skeezy kind of dirty type of a thing, and instead more of a really smart way of getting through the world by using our communal nature as a human species and leveraging our relations with one another is just going to be gold. The more you can tell people what you're interested in and also what you have no idea about, like the more you can be very open about your unknowns and your uncertainties and your fears and things like that, the more that people are going to also, number one, see you as a human and help to guide you and to help maybe fill in some of those Swiss cheese holes. So that's at least what I've got to offer for that biggest challenge.
Well, thank you. And if I may like just add that you're gonna get lots of no's. People are gonna say no. You're gonna one thing that I would encourage is to just, again, like I think Miroslava, you mentioned this, but keep the doors open. Like don't say no to, even if it's an internship, try for it to be paid. I really advocate for that. But yeah, just keep your opportunities open. Maybe you're focused on this. Maybe it's the government, maybe it's this one company, maybe it's this one university, but don't get too tied to that. Like just keep the opportunities open and apply. And the worst thing they can is just getting no response, getting a no, or hopefully many interviews. And yeah, and that part of networking, it's a lot. So it's also important to take breaks and be realistic with those things. But set a goal. Maybe it's applying for 10 opportunities each day, and then you can stop and you can feel like, okay, take a breather. But I think, let's see, I have some questions. All right. And of course, you're more than welcome, our panelists, to ask questions to each other. And yes, I placed the link to ESA's. ESA hosts this the Ecological listserv. You sign up. You don't have to be a member. You just need to make an account, and you'll get announcements like from everything from people looking for postdocs, if that's what you want to do. But there's also job opportunities that are advertised and they land in your inbox. So feel free to do that. So Amy, they're looking for ESA jobs or projects. If you I mean, you can send me an email, or you can just specify what ESA jobs. And actually, ESA has a career posting site. If you'd like to look at that, but I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to. But that's my email in case you want to learn more. But I'm actually gonna also send, once I find it, the link to our career jobs site, so you can check that there. So we talked about challenges, like academic background, and then the challenges and advice. And so along those lines around advice, what would be one piece of advice you would give your earlier career or undergrad self, if you could? And
I can start off with,
Awesome.
oh, or Valeria, do you want to start?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think not only through going through the process in academia on my own, but then having now taught for, golly, like, close to probably 15 years at the university level, I see so much. Well, what do I know? I'm graduating with this, degree, and what skills do I really have? And you feel that imposter syndrome then applying to a job or any job, it's like, well, I don't have any skills. Like, I took some classes in something, and sure, I have a credential now, but I have just recognized that in school, I learned how to think. Then when I exited school and I'm now in the real world, whatever that means, this is my class, this is my laboratory, this is my classroom. I'm learning by doing. And so that's, I guess, what I would have loved to be able to tell my earlier version of myself is to calm down. Like, you did what you needed to do, and you, again, learned how to find out pieces of information. Sure, okay, I did learn, facts, figures, important things in school, but to not assume that you need to only stay in school, or you need to stay in school and gobble up everything and absorb everything that you'll ever need to know before then getting out and being qualified to take on a job. I mean, I am always that person that when I'm hiring people, I'm finding the people that they only have big lots on their resume, and they're saying, well, I want to come and I want to be a field technician, or I want to come and I want to be a this whatever. And I'm like, yeah, if you've got the passion, and if you know how to turn your brain on, and you know how to be open to and receptive to learning something new, that's what I'm requesting. You don't need to come pre-stacked with everything already known. In fact, a lot of employers don't necessarily like that, because they want to help train you into what the way that their organization goes about things, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's my biggest advice that I would love to offer to my younger self, and potentially back to anyone on the call, if it resonates with you, to just not be freaked out by the feeling that you might not know everything, to still put those, the job feelers out there, to still go after those things that you think you might never be able to achieve, because guess what? Certain doors end up opening, you get these certain opportunities, and then you go into these positions, into these contexts, into whatever it is that you're involved in, be it a paid position or a volunteer event or whatever. And that's where you learn so much of what it is that then you're applying to your life and to your work in your life. So definitely don't be overwhelmed by the feeling that imposter syndrome of, who am I? I don't know anything, because guess what? We all know a lot more than we know. And the most important thing, again, is to show up knowing that you might not know everything, and being open to learning from other people, and learning then from yourself as you're kind of stepping or muddling through that process.
I definitely agree with that, and it definitely resonates. I think throughout, I definitely felt that imposter syndrome. I still do at times. It's something that you actively work on. I think I would also add that it's okay to feel scared. I felt like throughout my career, just like, I'm like, when is this feeling of being scared of what the next step is gonna like stop? And you kind of just, I mean, for me, it was because I like to explore and do something more. So part of it is also being okay with being scared, and dealing with those uncertainties. And with that comes flexibility. And believe it or not, being flexible and resourceful are some really good qualities to have, and what employers look at. Because at the end of the day, like Kat mentioned, they can teach you what you need to know. But if it's like first the attitude, as well as your willingness to work and learn, it's what's most important. And for my job, I completely had to learn a really big set of skills that I did not have before. I did not know what every chemical did. And I'm like, so when I was applying for this position, it was like looking at chemicals and toxicity of stuff that I had never even like seen before. But that wasn't the job. It was just having somebody that's going to be able to look up these things and try to figure out what's the best way to do it. So not selling yourself short. A lot of these skills are transferable. We go to school to learn how to think, like Kat said, and then we do the thinking. And I think one big advice would be also to, if you don't qualify for every single like skill set from a job, I would say to still apply and see if they'll give you an interview. A lot of the times we don't check all the boxes, but that's totally okay. And I think there was a study, which I'm not sure, can't quote me on this, that it was mostly men that would apply to different jobs that they did not check all the boxes for, but women, if they didn't check all the boxes, they wouldn't apply. I can't say that that is true or not, but in my opinion, I always felt a little like I would not apply if I didn't check all the boxes. But it wasn't until talking to different mentors that they were like, yeah, you'll be qualified for this. Like, you should definitely try and apply. Yeah, and just learning and being flexible. I think like it's okay if your path is not the same as others. And my path was very different from the 3 other grad students I started with. We're all in way different paths. And it's okay. It's just whatever works for you and your life. A big thing is also taking into account that your way of life and what you value as a person is important too. For me, a lot of the times was job security. I grew up not having that job security and having a postdoc life, not knowing what I was going to do the next year. It was a little bit too much nerve-wracking for me. But maybe in the future, after this position, maybe I'll want to go back to academia. It's good to have those connections and keep in touch. I'm still working with several colleagues from my university. So although I'm in the federal government, I'm still like a courtesy postdoc at my university, working on projects that I started during grad school. So it's not that you can't like do it all, but you have options and you can explore those options.
Yeah, I would add, I mean, everything was said, right? You don't want to, you want to make sure you keep your ethics in mind, your values in mind, you reach out, you find mentorship, and you learn from as many places as possible, not just in school. I'd also just don't pigeonhole yourself. I remember meeting a lot of folks my first year, and they made it very clear, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a vet, I'm going to be an engineer, all these very ambitious goals, and most of them met it, easy peasy. But what you don't want to happen is be so focused in on being a doctor, being a vet, being a PhD, being a researcher, whatever the case is, and realizing, oh, I missed out on this one opportunity that sounds really fun just to say it's fun. Or you were so focused on getting, you know, a 4.0 in all of your major classes, for example, and you didn't realize there was a perfect internship opportunity waiting for you right there that didn't have the exact keywords you were looking for. So I always tell folks, it's okay to have interests. It's okay to, you know, not do everything ecology based because you don't want to burn yourself out. It's okay to have different interests because there's a good chance that regardless of where your values are, where you come from, what your ethics are, whatever you want to call it, it's going to tie in really nicely with whatever career path you choose in because you're coming in as a person, not just a job applicant. So for example, for me in college, the best way I found a sense of community was through my running team. So I would just be, you know, running miles on end and getting sunburned, learning about the campus, all that stuff. And whenever I'm out with other park technicians and we're setting wildlife cameras, I'm a good stretch ahead of them, not because I'm that fast, it's just I'm used to going for miles and miles on end without getting too tired. And it's not that I knew, okay, I'm going to be a park guy, so I have to have really good endurance right off the bat. It was more of a, I enjoy running for the sake of running. It's fun to me. And I have other folks who, for example, one of my colleagues, she's the community volunteer ambassador through AmeriCorps in the park. Awesome person. Her background's in communications. She learned about native plants just off of Instagram and taking all these free classes to the point where she's coming in and she's leading a lot of our nursery volunteer events, not because it's her background, but she just genuinely enjoys learning about plants. And because of her communications background, not just because of the essays she wrote or her assignments, but because from her upbringing, she realized how important it was connecting native plants and communication to folks who might not necessarily have that direct tie with them. She was able to blend it into a myriad of projects going on in the park. So it's okay to have different interests. I really hope that folks don't live just for a career. It's great that a career, if that's your main ambition or main drive, there's nothing wrong with that. You just want to make sure that whatever outlet you have is a nice, happy, fun, enjoyable one. So you're not always in work mode. And once you're, this is of course very dependent on your background, whether or not you're working with like having 3 jobs or multiple volunteer opportunities. And that's like a whole different conversation there. But regardless of what you end up doing, you want to make sure that you're able to find those creative, fun outlets, whatever they end up being. Because once you're a happier person overall, there's a good chance that'll show up in your work ethic. It'll show up in your application, in your cover letter. So when you find the job and you meet 2 out of the 4 required, task, duties, qualifications, you can still apply, but make sure you say, yes, I might not know exactly how to track animals nonstop, but I'm comfortable running in circles, meaning I have that sense of mental strength to constantly be staring at books to study whatever it is I need to do. So it's okay to have different interests. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself just because it's not the exact fit. And I always say that not to discourage folks from going for that specific career path, but there's a good chance you're going to find something that fits even nicer than what you would expect to get in college.
Yeah, like most of those like job applications that I realize, I don't know how I learned about this term, but it's a term of the purple squirrel. What people are looking, those job posts are for this purple squirrel. It's something that doesn't exist. But you have to, if you're looking for a job and you're like, hey, I do meet maybe not 100%, 0.000% of all these things, but I'm like, I want to get this job, and I have this, like, Kat is looking for someone with the passion, someone who can say, like, I can fit this position, I can fit these shoes, and I have an interest in learning whatever it is. I don't know, something I don't know what to do, you learn it, even if it's not in the job posts. You kind of end up learning different tools, platforms, systems, like, you don't know. So yeah, if I had to give my younger self some advice, is to trust myself, stop doubting, like, better you than someone else. I know it sounds kind of selfish, but sometimes you have to get into that position, because yeah, besides getting tired, because it can be overwhelming, in a daunting process, filled with this uncertainty, you gotta remind yourself that you're worth it, and that you are qualified, you are a professional, you deserve a stable career and a job. But yeah, it is tricky. Not everyone has a support system, so that's something that we have to be. I feel like I'm fortunate to have a support system, but it's still difficult. All right. See if I have any questions. Not yet. Oh, you're welcome, Amy. All right, let's see. So now that it's 6. I want to shift gears a little bit, and we've talked about that academic background and all that, but what about the future and the field, like ecology? Such a broad term, and I know some of us did environmental science, which is like, what is that? What is ecology? How are they different? And then we have landscape architecture, and how to then these non-traditional I guess, paths that do have an ecological aspect there, but it's not necessarily obvious for everyone everywhere. So how would you say that the ecology and the environmental sciences field have changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Any volunteers? I don't want to call up on anybody. I don't want to add any stress, but so no,
I'm like, I'm seeing Valeria like
know.
going towards it. I'm like, well, I took the first one last time. So yeah, do you want to
It's
start on this
okay,
one?
you can, sure. Well, from my opinion, I think ecology is always an exciting field, the best field, I might say. But I see it as the last 5 years. I think it's become more diverse than it was before. And that's really good to see as coming from an underrepresented person. At least in my division, it's very, very diverse. And I think diversity brings a really good perspective within ecology because we can tackle problems in a way that is respectful of the communities and the public that are affected by these problems. And in the field, in my field especially, it's been a big push about ecological justice in terms of communities and incorporating being respectful of like just the communities and the community input on how scientists do cleanups at these Superfund sites. And not just within EPA, but I think overall, we are taking into account that ecology is not just about the natural world, that humans are a big part of it, communities are a big part of it, and there is certain communities that are more affected by climate change and sea level rise and all these different climate changes overall. And I think it's going to be a big push towards being more active in creating solutions. So I felt like in ecology, what I learned from in ecology, it was more exploring, trying to figure out how things work. Not that that's just stopping, but more into creating solutions. And those solutions are taken into account the diversity and problems with environmental justice. So that what I would like to see is continuing that diversity, really creative solutions, because we have some really big problems, and to tackle those big problems, you need interdisciplinary solutions. So, I mean, I think it's an exciting time to be an ecologist. It's a tough time to be an ecologist. It takes a mental toll as an ecologist or as just a human living in this world, right? With just all the negative news we tend to see. My field tends to be very negative because I am dealing with really heavy polluted sites. But what helps me keep grounded is knowing that there's really big efforts into cleaning it up, making sure that the community is informed, and that we're doing something about it. So just, I guess, I love to see that and continue the communication of that.
Yeah, and that honestly was a lot of what I was going to touch on. I mean, for sure, I have seen so much increase in diversity. And I will just say that, like, out of all of the professional organizations that I'm a part of and the different groups that I'm a part of, ESA was the first one that gave me a non-binary checkbox to check, and is continuing to set the stage for how it is to integrate a diversity of tons of different people into a field that traditionally has been not super diverse. So to just see us as even a professional organization jump into that uncomfortable space and really grab the helm, and I think be able to help others see how to infuse more people, more perspectives. I mean, even the fact that our annual meeting coming up in August is Ecology for All, right? And ecologists that are doing tons of different things. Like, I think I'm loving that I'm seeing that trajectory, and I'm hoping to see more of that in the future. And I think beyond just, what race are you, what sex are you, what gender are you, what age are you, to think about the perspectives too, as a sense of diversity. I am seeing, as was also mentioned, just the diversity of integrating different concepts and different specialties. A lot of people assume, oh, you're an urban ecologist. That means that you just look at the environment and ecosystems in an urban context. And I'm like, oh no, no. I wish it was that easy of where I just went out and monitored plants and non-human animals, but we're a huge part of that ecosystem. We are part of the animals. And it's fascinating to then see how much ecology is just being infused into public health, into housing, into law, into planning, into the medical, like every single other discipline or degree that you could get or job that you could get, at least in my life in LA and what I'm seeing in a lot of other spaces across the country and world, is the fact that because of the climate crisis we're in, because of the mass extinction that we're in, because of where we're at, we're having to integrate ecology and that thinking into all of the other aspects of the goals that we're focusing on. And for good reason, we're also needing to not just stay in our own ecological bubble, but we're really needing to think about, again, it's not just, doing ecology in whatever environment you're in. It's really being in that environment and understanding what are the social and political and cultural and economic systems that are inherently woven to those ecological and environmental systems that we're trained to focus on. And how do you reach out to those experts who understand those systems maybe a little bit more than you do, and you learn from them and you work with them. So I am hopeful that that's also the future trajectory, is that we continue to really de-silo a lot of these efforts that we put into clearly defined boxes or disciplines for efficiency's sake in the past. I think my favorite saying is always that a box is not so good at solving problems, so we might as well think outside of it and come up with different solutions. And I'm seeing a lot of that, especially in the context of Los Angeles. And so I'm really hopeful that we keep kind of having this very holistic approach and kind of interdisciplinary integrated approach to the way that we're all working together as not only ecologists, but as all of these other kind of change makers who are hoping to do what they are passionate about doing, in the world as well.
Yes, like everything you both said was perfect. All I would add is for those undergrads who are looking to get into the field of ecology, knowing how much change is coming, working with the communities, working with more of this interdisciplinary approach, technology is getting bigger and very, very integral for a lot of the research. I know when I was an undergrad, as soon as I heard R or GIS, I would turn the other way. Those are going to be really important skills, regardless of what field you're in. So I would strongly encourage folks, if you're able to get an internship or even a class or an extracurricular, some way to get experience with RStudio, with ArcGIS, any sort of coding thing, with satellite imagery, with a lot of the data sets that have existed for, decades, centuries. There's a lot of data, and until now, we're really understanding those implications. So being able to use software or computer skills, I should say, to really understand what that'll look like, picturing how environments are going to change in the future is going to be really key. I know with the Santa Monica Mountains, a lot of our efforts or a lot of the funds we get goes towards restoration. So less on the what exactly is out there, more of a let's fix what little we know we have and what's already not the best shape. And a lot of that research comes in from, again, folks who are using those analytical skills, not necessarily out in the field, but going inside and understanding the decades of data that already exists. And I'm with, scary AI technology and everything else that's going to be coming out in the very near future, feeling comfortable, like using a lot of the data online or just with software type deals. That's going to be your best bet. I know folks who like internships with the Park Service, if you have that coding skills, or you have that GIS specialty, whatever you want to call it, you are very competitive and very well sought after.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And this term of like diversity and it's a lifelong thing. It's an ever evolving thing, and just like I think, sorry, I'm just gonna put that there. Just like us as professionals, I found like you have to be, no matter if you're in ecology or whatever the discipline, it sounds like you have to be a lifelong learner. And that also, as an organization, I can say like ESA, it's far away from perfection. So there's only room for improvement. So yeah, and it's also preparing for the unknown. How do we prepare? You are all problem solvers, and we know, like I placed in the chat, diversity drives innovation, and we're all in a way trying to solve this big real world problems, and we haven't been necessarily equipped with that training. You don't get that training at school. You get that training by doing the task and getting these real life experiences. So that's also something that I have to, in my current role, I kind of have to think about the unknown. And it's almost impossible. It's like looking at how this ecological and educational landscape is changing, but also it's never going to be at the pace that it should go, because it's just with technology, it's just you can't keep up basically. But anyway, so what would you say is the biggest challenge in ecology now?
I think mine is similar to my last response, is that, piggybacking off of what I was saying in terms of like all of ecology is now integrated with all of these other competing goals. Well, that's my challenge then. How is it that in a place like Los Angeles, where we are needing housing, can we also be at the same time looking at and having on the same hand and the same weight housing for plants and animals? Like how it comes into those kind of discussions of where it's tough to talk about the needs, the hella other needs that humans have, and then for us to think about the work that we're also trying to get done and to balance those in a way that makes sense for us as a human species, but then also makes sense for us as being an animal within this larger ecosystem and planet. So that's at least something that I get challenged by a lot, is knowing that maybe some of the goals and or priorities that are at the forefront of my work are ones that need to be balanced with a lot of other, cross-competing goals and initiatives. And so the challenge is then to figure out, well, how do you have that not be a competition? How do, again, you really figure out, well, where are those points where you can come to an agreement and where can you work together, and it becomes that collaboration, and you really start to even integrate the concepts of our work then with a lot of the other kind of goals and initiatives that are happening. So I again am hopeful that we'll continue to figure that out, but there is a lot of kind of the either or mindset still, I think, and I'm really trying to work towards with a lot of other people and hoping more join to get to the and, that we can get really everything that we need. We just need to be innovative in terms of thinking about how to get there.
I will say I'm trying not to be too cynical, but for me, it gets really discouraging when opportunities are limited either by money or by apathy. So funding in the environmental ecological field, it feels like it's very stagnant, but our needs are rising and rising and rising. So to get the funding, to hire the folks with expertise, to help pay for folks to gain that expertise, always feels like an uphill battle. And, we talked about it earlier. It's very disheartening when paid internship opportunities or unpaid volunteer opportunities are the only way to get that experience, and we're not compensating folks for their time appropriately, because then it's, there's that huge disparity about who gets these opportunities, and I won't go down that path, but pretty much it always comes, for me, a lot of it just comes down to there's limited funding for the hundreds of great ideas that come from a community or working with a government agency or with academia or universities. And in one sense, it helps out because that means, you have to go and partner with another organization. You get more minds on that similar goal. So you get, again, that new mix of perspectives to try tackling this issue, whatever it is you're looking for funding for, with a different perspective. But that also means you use a lot more resources to get at the same amount of money, which is going to be limited to more people. And for me, it sucks because that means we're constantly losing or missing out on having incredible folks helping out, whether it be students who are gaining that internship experience or folks, for example, in my park, it feels like folks are leaving left and right because the housing crisis in Los Angeles sucks. And folks, even with the government, can't afford to live here without having 4.5 roommates living with them. So it's exciting because you can see there's a lot of folks who are out there and excited to help out, but it's discouraging because with that limited funding, that minimum wage pay for a lot of experience required for these restoration, for these environmental fields, they get turned around really quickly and they have to switch career paths or go into something that might not be exactly what they were looking for, which by itself isn't a bad thing, but then that leads to a growing apathy where a lot of folks are like, oh, that's not worth it. Oh, there's not pay in this field. Oh, the tree's going to die anyways. Why do we have to bother looking into it? And for me, seeing that there are organizations that are working with the community, making sure folks don't feel discouraged, but they feel enlightened that they can do their support, or they can provide more support into these fields and encourage more folks to apply for more funding and get, work. I don't want to go into much of the politics necessarily, but there is a growing movement, I think, to get more funding towards not so happy topics like, the environmental degradation and climate change and the newest mass extinction coming around. So trying not to be too cynical, but for me, the issues always come down to the apathy that folks have when it comes to providing the time and support, and also the lack of funding. But like we talked about in the previous question, it's looking better. We're working on, I think the field as a whole is working in the right direction. I think it's just another one of the many reasons to be an ecologist. You have to have a really sturdy backbone and very thick skin to stay as optimistic as you can, relying on that positive network you have around you, while also understanding there will be many uphill battles. But once you get there, it'll feel like you're on top of the world.
I definitely agree. I think also it's those little wins that keep you going. A lot of the times it could be discouraging. It is tough, especially because it's not a very lucrative career on its own. And if you do live, Boston's also extremely expensive, and there's high turnover rates as well. It's just, I mean, for the federal government, it is directly tied to the government how much money is spent. So for the EPA side, we've been very fortunate to have a really big push towards for environmental justice. So there's a big funding, a lot of jobs being posted. So if you're looking for jobs, that is a really great time to look for jobs in EPA. And so it is a good time now, but it wasn't before, and we don't know how it will look. So the uncertainty is always glooming, but having that touch of reality of knowing that if you can stay positive with what you have, that you can do to, that it's under your control, right? So whether it's a small task, whether it's a project that you're working on at work, it's the small wins that keep you going. And I think overall ecology, I think we would have quit if we didn't think that it was going to get any better, or if we thought that, like it was just going downhill. I think more people are realizing the importance of the environment and cohabiting with it and taking care of it. And a big part of it is science communication. And so if you want to add certain skills to your resume, taking a public speaking class, or even improv as something fun, may be really good to really encourage you to be able to talk to just the regular public about your research or science. Just for me, as if you cannot tell already, I'm not the greatest public speaker, but every chance I get to develop my skills or push myself to practice, I do it. And mostly not just because I love it, but because I want people to know what I love about ecology and what I love about my work, and for them to understand how important it is. And I think in the world of TikTok and Instagram and news, it could be a little difficult because you could get misinformation out there. But I think it's also great because you could reach a wider audience. So even if you are not even if you're talking about your whatever news you found that day, anything that you want to share, I think it still makes an impact some way. So it's a fine line with social media, but there could be a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of really good science communicators that probably get to get so much more news than if you put out an article in a journal. So at that point, people are going to care about what they know. And that goes towards what choices they make and what they value and what they end up voting for and what they end up protecting. So although I'd like to think that I'm very separated from that because we are unbiased scientists, we cannot really fully break away from that, and understanding that people are going to protect what they know, what they care about is a big part of our jobs as well. It's always somehow tied and connected.
Yeah, that concept of I would like to think that now science as a whole, people are starting to understand the importance of science, and it's actually more accessible than you think. It's not this thing that is only handled in a lab in this closed space, but it's something bigger, and actually everyone is a scientist and science is all around us. But then there's this competing side where there's all this misinformation, and it's then you have your job as a scientist, where however it looks like, and then you have to add this other job, which is like being an educator, and it's just intense. It's a lot of work, and combining it to all the other challenges you've mentioned, integrating and having these competing goals, the apathy and the lack of funding, and then the uncertainty of it all. And I would like to think that ESA is one of those communities, one of those structures that are there to support ecologists wherever they're at. These calls are made mostly for those in the undergrad level. And I'm also watching and the clock being considerate of everyone's time. But if again, I want to open it up to the rest of the participants to ask questions if you want. But if not, I'm kind of closing the panel with, well, how can you all participants can get in touch with you all. I think you've shared some resources around federal job opportunities. So that's great. I shared my email. If anybody by any chance has mentorship opportunities or you're hiring that you'd like to share, let us know. Awesome. Thank you, Kat. And also, how can just very quickly, kind of again closing this down, how can ESA be a part of your goals? I don't know if anybody has like specific goals. I know we don't have as much funding as the government to give you, but I don't know if you have any thoughts around that. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I think SEEDS does a great job supporting its students with their capabilities. As an undergrad, I think some of the best experiences were going to ESA meetings and being paired up with a mentor. I still keep in touch with my mentors. I've seen them throughout. We've collaborated in the future. Like, it's such a great way to not have to be the one that starts the conversation, but kind of get that like push to do that. I think that's extremely great. And if you guys have the opportunity to apply to go to the ESA, I mean, they fund you to go and they set you up with a mentor. And you also, part of it is creating your community. So a big part is also meeting students that are also SEEDS. I still talk to my SEEDS colleagues now. Actually, when I moved to Boston, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the area. I reached out to one of my SEEDS alumni that used to live here, and she gave me the overview of where to live. And like, if I needed anything, she introduced me to a few friends. So it's always good to have that network and that support, not just on academics, but life stuff. And so I think that is very valuable. And the workshops that you guys provide, I think workshops on resume building would be great. I know that you do for graduate students, like different workshops for ecology. So that was also great with GitHub and R. Those are some sort of like universal ways that you can like of skills that are useful anywhere. But even if you don't have those skills developed, you could always develop them later on. You'll be surprised how many people don't use R outside of academia. They use Excel. And then you could be the one that is like, hey, you can make this faster by using R when you go in. So I think SEEDS does a really great job doing that. And the field trips are really fun. I have been a mentor and also gone as a student. And that shows different aspects of ecology, not just, I got to go to a marine biology one, but I also went to like a stream ecology in Wisconsin the first time I saw snow. And I'm like, I had never seen like snow on the ground. So just creating that like opportunities for people to apply and do it. I do wish that it would be like more widely spread. Like if it was like, if seeds could reach out to universities and have them put in their listservs, like those opportunities to join, because not all universities have a seeds chapter. So that would be a great way to reach out to other students, or maybe create more chapters. So yeah, but they're doing a good job.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I take all these but as you can imagine, we're ESA, even as a national organization, is a small but mighty team. So this is helpful to prioritize, no? And sometimes you need to start, stop, and move things around. So this is helpful. And I work with chapters, and sometimes we realize, like, how we can work more efficiently around this. But I kind of rely on others to get more creative ideas. So thank you, Valeria. And I don't know if anybody has any other closing remarks. No.
I would just add really briefly, it's very intimidating to go and talk to strangers and get advice and hear from other students. And as an undergrad, the only way I would go to these events would be like if there was free food in person, or if there's a chance to talk in a smaller group. So I would encourage either the undergrad students or those who are considering or able to start a seeds chapter, small casual events. Doesn't have to be a professor giving a mini lecture. Just, for example, with the data chapter, we would have dinner. So you just go and eat food and stand uncomfortably in the corner, and then that one person would start bouncing around, and then folks start comfortably chatting with one another. Or even just Zoom game nights. So you just hear about what other folks are up to, I think is really key. Most of my mentors are not from the respective fields or research field I want to get into. It's just because we get along great and they talked to me first, and I felt comfortable continuing that conversation. And regardless of their academic or research backgrounds, they've been great resources to me because I feel comfortable and safe sharing my concerns with them. So being able to have that, I don't know how it worked through Zoom nationally, but having that opportunity to comfortably share concerns in either breakout groups or in a much more like back and forth conversation, I think would be great. But yeah, I can't, like, shout out to Seeds. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for the organization. So thank you, ESA, for all you've been doing.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know if I have anything else to add, because I feel like everything that's been listed out is like the prime stuff to focus on. One thing that came to mind that I was chuckling about in my head, though, was that when I moved to LA, a woman gave me this book that was like 101 questions for strangers or something. And she was like, this is gold. And if you are going to a certain event where nobody, open up to a random page in this book, come up with 3 questions, memorize them. And then when you go to this event, like, you don't always have to be talking about what the event is about or what the subject matter is. More often than not, the way that you spark a conversation with somebody is, again, by being just a human being. And most people latch onto the weather. We've all heard about that. Oh, well, yes, it's raining again today, or it hasn't rained. But to think about what else you could comment on. Oh, I liked your tie. Where'd you get it? And then you find this awesome, amazing backstory about that person. It's like, be open to just sparking a conversation and not being afraid about where it goes. So I know that's a funny, weird thing to bring up, but I just remember so vividly that woman was so excited to give me this book of questions, because she was like, this is going to be your way to meeting people in Los Angeles. So definitely, there are some fun little tricks and techniques like that. But I definitely think, the more that y'all can get involved in things like this, to find other similar networks like this, that's going to be really, that's the hyphen network of where this is how things spread, and how things really end up happening in a positive way. So yeah, I echo everything else that was said, and go get yourself one of those 101 question books.
Yes, we are
And that
social,
oh,
we're
sorry.
social being. Oh, I'm sorry, Valeria.
It's okay. It's okay. I was just gonna add that like writing down or figuring out questions, that also works when you're doing an interview. So if you write down questions that you'd like to ask at the end, if you're anything like me, I get very nervous and just blank. And writing down certain questions I like to know about the organization or the job that I'm applying for is really important. Also, I like to write down adjectives that describe my work ethic and like what I want to highlight. And I also have it with me written down when I have interviews. And that helps me, even if I forget something, just glance, I'm like, okay, like leader, and then talk about that. And it's just like little tips when interviewing that will make you feel more comfortable if you have that all in your hands. And obviously just practicing. A lot of the times it's a numbers game. You have to apply to everything and see where you land. And at least for my federal government experience, I had applied to over 45 positions. Probably I was not well fit for a lot of them, but the ones that I did get interviews, it worked well. But again, it's a numbers game. So don't feel bad about just making those applications. And USA Jobs makes it really easy to apply to different positions with different resumes. And you can tailor your resumes. You have different versions also. So in those different versions, you could say like, this is for mainly ecology. If you're into science communications, it's more a science communication policy resume, etc. So apply. And also reach out to people on LinkedIn, and it really does work. So a lot of people don't put as much information or effort into their LinkedIn, but LinkedIn also has job posts, and you can sign up for notices through LinkedIn to get job posts. And sometimes recruiters will message you in LinkedIn and encourage you to apply if they think you're a good fit, if you put your resume in your LinkedIn. And also, it's a good way to stay connected with your network. So if you met somebody or went to a seminar, start following them. And that's how you connect and broaden your network and maybe hear of job opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise. That was the job wise. That's it. I'm done.
Yes, like what I was mentioning was that humans are social creatures, but we still need like the push and more skill development in the area, especially after the pandemic. No, it's like social anxiety. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Kat. Thank you, Miroslava. Thank you, Valeria. And thank you all for attending and participating. And yeah, I hope you have a great evening and afternoon if you're in the West. And well, take care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.